Hello and welcome to another podcast episode. I will be talking about shared accommodation. So there's one thing that I want to talk to you about is shared accommodation. There's lots of them in Exeter, maybe in the UK alone. Each provider is different. Let me start with Woodview. But before Woodview, I did stay with foster parents, Corinne and David, to whom I was not fond of because of false accusations into hurting their dog. Thankfully, that was only a taster opportunity, but I did not know that until much later. I even threatened to run away, packing my suitcase. I guess in some providers they had resident restrictions, and it occasionally made me feel like a prisoner. I had curfews, which I hated and eventually appreciated, because you will never see me on the last bus home, or if you do, that will be very rare. Anyway, that was just a brief background before I lived at Woodview. Living at Woodview was challenging. They got me out a lot. I was only allowed 1 hour of screen time per day, no matter what type of technology I used. They did help me to cook though, so yes, I can cook. At Woodview I met other girls like myself. I was only allowed to have it was only allowed to have females from when I lived there for as far as I know. And I lived there for 5 years. In my autobiography, the first one, I was able to share some photos. I have also shared some photos in my second autobiography. This was when I was in care, receiving 24/7 care. They had even had beds in the office for the carers to sleep in. I remember one night I could not sleep and I turned on the TV in the lounge as quietly as possibly and started to watch a late night documentary about mermaids, if they were real. I'm a big fan of the supernatural, especially after being an empath myself. We are considered members of the supernatural. And I spent 5 years here at Woodview, having 2 sets of birthdays and 2 sets of Christmases. Oh, we were spoiled rotten. I can't remember even every holiday, but I do remember going to Wales and going through the movie set of Wolf Hall. I sadly don't have that photo anymore, otherwise I would have shared it by now. It exists only in my memory. I attended Girl Guides, which is like Scouts, but for girls only, and I celebrated their 100th year. And I did my Girl Guide promise at the top of the church tower. Don't remember which church it was, but I do have a photographic evidence of this. I remember doing the most painfulest belly flop in the local pool, causing water to rise all over the walls, soaking a teacher and a student too. All I can say is, oops. I learned how to do horse riding. I remember the horse I rode was called George, and he was a retired army horse. I remember that doing horse riding one day and got my welly caught on the fence as we were heading out, almost pulling a muscle on my leg. Yikes, in other words. I remember I had a couple of driving lessons when I turned 17 at Woodview. I felt free when driving, but also it did provoke my anxiety a little, and I decided that driving is not for me. Then I left to live with Joan. I lived at Joan's side of the house, and I wasn't there for much longer, mainly because I wasn't very fond of her. Joan also thought I hurt her animals, but at least she didn't go as far as putting a lock on a cage like Corinne did. I did enjoy my own space in the studio flat that Joan had and her daughter had, and I'd say I'd lived there for a few months before I had to go backwards in 24/7 care. The 24/7 care was with Sally, and oh my goodness, she does not make a good carer. She was very nosy individual, and at the time I almost dated my housemate George. Yes, another George. And I remember saying to Joan, sometimes you have to go backwards to go forwards, which is very true fact. But I wasn't going to be staying at Sally's for very long. I did have a good bond with her dog, and I wish I still had it, but sadly I don't have the selfie that I did have with the dog. I'm a dog and cat person, you see, and I don't ever want to be in the position to choose, even though now I have a rabbit who is my emotional support. Then, before you know it, came Garland support, and I was with Garland for 3 years before I moved on to independent living. At Garland support, I made some lovely friends. One who actually said she hated me, I've heard worse. Another I fell in love with, and she turned into an alcoholic, just like her brother. Anyway, it wasn't before long that I had my own independent flat, which did not go well, but that's more on that later.